Welcome to Our Next Existence by Katie and the Chorus. I'm Katie, former technology strategist turned reluctant spiritual medium, and I channel messages from the Chorus, a group of beings just beyond our sensory perceptions who are loving, expansive, and who greatly enjoy sharing their perspective of us. Join us each week as we share and discuss their ideas about humanity's existence, purpose, and future. Concepts you can draw from to accelerate your path, expand your perceptions, and ultimately step into the flow of the universe and your life. For those who are listening in real time, I feel like I should give you an explanation as to where I've been. Fortunately or unfortunately, however, I'm not sure I have words to describe what's been happening. Or maybe that's what this episode will be about. But I do want to begin today by saying thank you. Thank you to all of you who have sent me messages, friends who have called and asked when I will release an episode again and have encouraged me to do so. I appreciate every message, even sometimes when I know I can't respond to them in that exact moment, that it's not time, that I have to keep doing what I'm doing. It's nice to feel connected in this world. Awakening is a lot some days, isn't it? I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think it's different when we go through it together. It spreads out the weight over more surface area, if you know what I mean. And today I want to talk about something that I think we have all been going through together lately. A sort of growing sense of something impending, while potentially feeling a little bit adrift in your own life. Going through the motions and finding that they sustain you in a way that somehow you get through the day, but also that they don't in the way they did before. The sense of satisfaction that used to be there when you completed some of these tasks is now missing. You could call it a depression, but maybe this feels different than it did before. Depressed, sure, just like the energetic definition the Chorus gave us, which is that you're aware of something massive coming and you're aware that you're not there yet. But this awareness is different this time. It doesn't feel so out of your body. Perhaps it feels very much in your body. You feel all of it. You're aware of all of it. And as a friend of mine recently called it on the phone, it's a sort of uncomfortable, powerless awareness. Yes, it's awareness. But just because we feel aware of more than ever doesn't instantly equate to knowing and feeling the power within us to do anything about it. I also have been talking to the Chorus about this sensation these last several weeks. More than ever, I've been immersed in my human activities. There's a sweetness to it in some moments, the simplicity of digging holes for plants. I put the shovel in the ground and then a few minutes later, there's a hole. It's direct and it's satisfying to my earthbound self. But also, in the moments when I am not occupied, the sense of something coming is so overwhelming as to make me feel breathless. There's a phrase in American English called ripping off the Band-Aid. It's a phrase that describes the literal process of ripping off a Band-Aid, which can be both excruciating and satisfying all at once. And the phrase is meant to indicate this, that sometimes ripping off the Band-Aid is a painful process, but in the end, you're Band-Aid free. One way to describe what's happening right now to all of us energetically is that the Band-Aid is being ripped off. And in some moments, it feels like exactly everything that needs to happen. In some moments, it feels excruciatingly slow. Because we all know that eventually this thing, this change, this shift will have occurred. The hole will be dug, the Band-Aid will be off. Just because we know or feel the direction that it appears to be going doesn't mean we can necessarily skip the process of ripping off the Band-Aid, but in this case, it also means we can't necessarily speed up the ripping off of the Band-Aid. And some days it feels like it's one full day of ripping out one hair. The whole day is just this one agonizing hair. And it's like, can we skip this? Can we speed it up? Can we just rip it off? I have also been extremely annoyed with this sensation this entire summer. And I've had more than one conversation with the chorus about it. Some of our earlier conversations went a little like this. What the hell is this? What do I feel is coming still? I still feel like it's coming. I thought I knew what was coming and then something happened, but then it just ramped up the feelings of things coming, which makes me feel like it was part of what was arriving, but what's arriving still hasn't arrived yet. And I feel like I'm just sitting around doing nothing, waiting for this inevitable giantness while going through the motions of my life, completely dissatisfied. Well, not always, because sometimes I'm still really grateful, but mostly dissatisfied with the actions in my life. And every now and then I feel like it's going to be okay, but then most of the time I just feel like I can't breathe. And the chorus usually validated my perspective the way they do. And they said, we see this too. Which sometimes just feels annoying, but other times feels kind of validating. And then I said, so what's going on? Why do I feel this way? And they would say something to the effect of, beloved, there are many waves and kinds of energy in creation. Where you've been, you have been asleep to most of this variety and diversity. As you are awakening, you are coming to sense and feel these different waves. And there is a very large wave headed in your direction, you could say. Were you to use directions, and you do, and we think that's wonderful. They went on to describe how, as we are awakening, this feeling part of us is feeling more things than maybe we've even had words to describe here. Contexts that haven't existed. Phrases and nomenclature to describe systems that we didn't know were there. So here we are feeling this impending new wave of creation, not even knowing that there were waves, and definitely not able to translate that into a five senses expression of action, because these waves of energy and this ability to sense these things is far and away beyond the beliefs of prevention and protection. And as we sense this new and impending thing coming, because ourselves have reached far enough outward beyond day-to-day life to sense it, our mind is going through a transition. Our bodies are transitioning. We are rewriting the ways that we express ourselves here because we are now capable of more here than we were before. Waves of creation, as I understand them, are powerful waves of energy and life. They give life to things. Therefore, there's really no way to prepare for them because the life that they give birth to hasn't yet arrived. And there's really no need to protect ourselves from them. So in this case, from the five senses perspective, where the majority of our actions had been chosen or taken based on our nonstop need to survive, there really is nothing to do. These energetic waves of creation fall outside of our schema of survival. So now that we're coming into a phase of awakening where we sense these things, really what's happening is as our consciousness walks through this process, we walk through the agitation that we feel when we don't know what to do. It's a close cousin to a depression where we feel lost, but we know we're not completely lost. We just don't know what to do deeply. We feel adrift. We feel directionless. We feel like there's bound to be some major change on the horizon, a job change, a direction change, a move to a different country or place, something major. But we can't start it yet. Why can't we start it yet? Well, we don't know where we're going. Why don't you know where we're going? And the mind turns in its circles again, looking for a five senses aspect for purchase to put its foot on in order to determine the next best step to intersect with or prepare for this future event. However, until that future event occurs, there is nothing here that connects to it yet. Therefore, there is often very little for us to do with regard to it. Now, does that mean if you feel inspired right now to start preparing for a move or to start preparing for a career change, you shouldn't do it? Not at all. Inspirations born of the present moment are always accurate for the energy of the present moment. So you may be sensing something that does or doesn't relate to the impending wave of creation. And though we're using the analogy of this one massive wave coming, for there are different scales and varieties of these things, there's also lots of waves of energy swirling around right here, right now. So even though we're all waiting for this one Band-Aid to finally get ripped off, this one massive Band-Aid that we all feel coming, we're actually covered in Band-Aids. Just kidding. It's a really dark analogy. That's not what this means. We are actually feeling lots of different energy that is already here, that has already arrived, that is already unfolding. And this is where I got to in some of my conversations with the chorus. I would throw up my hands and I would say, well, I'm tired of waiting for this wave of energy. And they would say, are you? It's easy for the mind to become preoccupied with what is most limiting. As I think we've talked about before in this season and also previous seasons, if you're walking down the beach and your brain is already shopping at the grocery store, we might have considered that previously a good use of time because it's preparation. However, the further we go in awakening, the more we realize that what we daydreamed about an instance is very rarely identical to the actual physical expression of it here. So you can shop all day in your head, but when you get to the grocery store, you find out that the produce section caught on fire. It was an unforeseen event that your mind couldn't prepare for. So this is especially true in new energy. As we awaken, there will be things that happen at the grocery store that we couldn't have anticipated. It was just that in our reality up until now, everything was so redundant and repetitive that it was very reasonable for you to assume in your mind that the grocery store would be identical to the past 100 times you have been there, with maybe some degree of variation in how busy it was. But now we're coming into an era where potentially that thing won't be on the shelf, or something will be happening in the store, or the store itself may be open or closed or without electricity, or just got in a brand new shipment of this new fruit that you've never seen before. Everything is expanding, so everything is becoming more varied, meaning we're breaking free of the redundant, repetitive matrix of creation that we generated by way of our beliefs here, which were generated by way of our resonance with limitation. That grocery store that is the same every single time, by some views, is limitation. It is limiting the expressive power of creation by reducing its variety. So this wave of energy that we are all preoccupied with is a very similar aspect of the function of limitation that we created. By continuing to focus on and to continue to try to imagine what's coming and how to prepare for it, the mind is actually pulling us out of the present moment in which other things are happening. The same way daydreaming about the grocery store trip while you're walking on the beach is pulling you out of the present moment on the beach itself, where potentially a magical creature was right beside you in the water, but you wouldn't have noticed it because you were busy being human, running through to-dos in your head, which was the objective of that belief system, to distract you from variety, from the rest of creation, from the infiniteness of infinity, and from connection with other civilizations and other beings which surround us. As usual, it's nothing to attack, although there is some part of us that will want to attack it and say, I'm never imagining my grocery store trips ever again. And that's fine. And that's valid. It's a valid part of awakening to this stuff from this perspective. Sometimes we just really want to punch something once we realize it's been doing this the whole time, even though we're the ones who created it. But really what the chorus is saying is you may feel like you're sitting at a bus stop waiting for this giant bus to arrive. And we understand that perspective, but it's just a perspective. We are awash in a sea of energy. And maybe this wave that's coming is a new kind of wave than any of us have a conscious memory of ever having felt before. And so it's really powerful. And we got to walk through those experiences of feeling it and recognizing these beliefs that typically tried to prepare or meet it or do something in advance. Those are all parts of us. Those are all valid experiences. Feeling adrift at the start is also a way of starting to feel free. And also, there are probably lots of areas in your life where things are flowing. They may feel unimportant. They may feel non-critical. They may feel superfluous or even luxurious. And yet, the chorus pointed out to me again and again, as I came back to them with this question again and again, what's flowing? What feels easy right now? What came together nicely? Where do you feel that ease, beloved? And sure enough, every time they asked me this question, I had an answer. Even if I just sat there for a couple minutes, I would be like, well, I've been trying to build this fence for forever, and it was the easiest thing in the world today to just go down to the hardware store and get the lumber. Like I didn't even have to think about it. And they would say, exactly. Now, to the mind, there is a friction here because the fence that I'm putting around my AC unit, it's not even like a needed fence. It's like a decorative fence. The fence feels not at all pertinent to not only the wave, but day-to-day survival. So there's really not a lot about it that satisfies the angstiness of my five senses mind, other than that my five senses mind is very satisfied to build a thing and see it here on my visible wavelengths of light, to hold it on my physical, tangible wavelengths. And when I'm in the moment working on the project, that satisfaction actually fills me to completion. But when I'm daydreaming or trying to mentally scrutinize the fence and say, does that meet the wave? Then no, I'm met with a contrast, essentially, that these things do not speak to each other. And the chorus is saying, yes, exactly. You all are starting to realize how little your five senses actions alone accomplished. You are beginning to see the energetic parts of yourselves, how they function, and how they interact with all this other energy in the universe. Ultimately, there will be a translation down to the five senses. Were we to use a hierarchy where it's kind of like a siphon. These vaster energies that we feel will eventually produce themselves or reflect themselves here on these very, very, very particular wavelengths of the five senses. But what we're starting to expand into now are the other aspects of us that really do work directly with energy. We are beginning to feel the ingredients of this part of us, these waves of energy that move through creation and the universe. It's a whole other ball game, essentially. Though, yes, we're leaving one foot in this version of the game, we're expanding outward through it into different levels where there's different ways of playing. So I want to connect this now, this whole bucket of We're feeling new energies because we're expanding into different levels, and those levels function in an energetic way. I want to connect this now to something else that I'm hearing from a lot of you and a lot of my friends at this juncture in awakening. Time has become more fluid for all of us, right? Like we talked about last season. We're sort of aware of the day and the year, but we're just now more hyper aware than ever that stuff just happens in short or long periods of time. Or was that really yesterday? It feels like a year ago. The fluidity of time is now practically pervasive to some of us throughout our days. What we're coming into now is this shrinking of distance. Because of that fluidity, we have allowed in more possibility. If you remember from season 2, the water beings in particular said, we just view your beliefs about time as your beliefs about possibility. So as our beliefs about time get more fluid, so too is possibility. Through the doorway of possibility, we actually begin to close the distance between us and what we previously might have considered to be totally exceptional events. Some of these exceptional events that I know are starting to happen for many of you and for me as well is you are seeing or potentially experiencing more and different versions of contact. Maybe I'll just say. You're seeing a shadow walk through your family room. You're seeing a ship fly overhead. You're sensing someone watching you. You go out into the woods and you know somebody else is there. The distance that had been instituted or created between us and other civilizations is thinning. This is what we often call the thinning of the veil. The veil itself was a construct of distance that was generated by our ongoing resonance with these beliefs. As we shift out of these beliefs, the veil thins, the distance fades. Some of these other arenas, let's say, that the veil is thinning between us and them, are much more energetic arenas. We may be able to see it on what we consider to be visible wavelengths of light. But actually, as we are expanding, the instrumentation with which we are perceiving energy is expanding also. In the early years, our minds may translate this to, I just saw something the way I've always seen something. But in many ways, that is a different kind of eyesight. It just depends on how you look at it. Let's say that the electromagnetic spectrum is multidimensional. So right now, the electromagnetic spectrum, as we look at it, it's like, infrared on one end, ultraviolet on the other end. You go up or down in a scale. Okay, well, let's shoot straight up off that scale and say that's where the shadow is that you just saw in your family room. Now, you could say this is all one matrix of sight. True. You could also say that actually you're viewing something that's into a multidimensional aspect of the electromagnetic spectrum. You're off the line between infrared and ultraviolet. It could be considered a slightly different version of eyesight. If we based it on our historical context and you went to an eye doctor and you said, can you help me see these shadows better? The eye doctor would not be able to, because the physical lens and rods and cones, etc., as we have understood them, are built to interpret this other wavelength of light, this other spectrum. And so this new shadow that you're seeing, your mind is saying, I saw it with my eyeballs, but your eyeballs may not yet express in physical terms an aspect that reflects your ability to do this, if that makes sense. Okay, so it was a little bit of a sidebar into something specific. We'll get more into the body in the future as the body starts to change. But right now we're shrinking distance or collapsing it. So in those other wavelengths where you're perceiving these things through actually different aspects of your system, action and choice are made on those energetic wavelengths. So it may feel like you're still walking with your body, or, you could still pick stuff up in your family room while you see that shadow. And that's probably true, right? You're both here and there, which is awesome. and amazing. And we'll talk more about that. But the point is, if you were to interact with that shadow, you would probably also be using more of these energetic aspects of yourself, which we're just awakening to having. It is a slightly different version of the game. You are going to use slightly different tools in your toolbox. So back to waiting at the bus stop for this wave of creation. So here we are ripping off the Band-Aid, one painful hair at a time. And maybe now it might make a little more sense what we are accomplishing by slowly doing this. Because with each hair that rips off, with each moment that ticks by waiting at the bus stop, we are actually thoroughly, very, very thoroughly becoming consciously clear on the ways in which we are perceiving every nuance of that incoming energy. So you could say, Katie, I'm just sitting at the bus stop waiting for this wave of creation bus to arrive and it's driving me nuts. And I could say, yes. And also, do you feel it a little closer now? And you say, yes. And then I would say, do you feel it a little closer now? You say, yes. Do you feel it a little closer now? And I could sit there and annoyingly say that for the next however many period of time we're in for this. And if you slowed down and dropped into those sensations, you would actually realize that you are sensing nuance in every aspect of its approach. That sense of nuance that you are developing is actually your sense of the myriad ways that you are perceiving and interacting with energy, which some might even consider to be the basics of those energetic playing fields that we are expanding into. I know waiting at the bus stop is brutal, and I know ripping off these Band-Aids is so excruciating at times. And also, this is purposeful. This is needed. This is clarifying. And this is you becoming conscious of everything that you will utilize in the days ahead. It has already begun. And so, now you know where I've been. Sitting at the bus stop, watching every millimeter of this Band-Aid come off, feeling like nothing's going to happen ever again, and all the paths that I ever walked on have all ended, that I am adrift in my life. I'm just moving from one thing to the next the way I used to do and the way I still can, miraculously. And yet it doesn't even begin to touch all of this other stuff. And then with each peel of the Band-Aid, something else comes in. Some new message, some new realization, some new memory. And then it goes right back to normal. And I'm on the next trip, or I'm doing the next thing with family, and I'm back to being human. It's a strange sort of fluidity between all of my parts. I used to call it an oscillation, and sometimes that's still true, but I feel way, way beyond bouncing back and forth between two things. And I'm better now than I was before at cherishing the simplicity of sitting at a bus stop. I used to kick the bus stop and set it on fire. And now I can be there. I can be there just doing a regular human thing, just digging my fence posts, waiting for the bus to arrive. And at the same time, allow for a growing sense of all of these things that someday we'll all play with, we'll all interact with, we'll all feel more engaged in these senses than we do at this juncture. Because at this juncture, we're just being introduced. And perhaps if your brain needs to imagine anything at all, imagine that this introduction is one that you have waited for a very long time. And you don't want to miss a single second of it. Every extraordinary aspect of these sensations is like a glorious reacquaintance. like seeing someone after a long time away. And you can't wait to hear everything they have to say, everything they've experienced, all the ways they've grown, all the ways they've changed. That you've nowhere else to be. You are exactly in the right spot, feeling all of the right things, getting to know their beautiful intricacies, and rising with each and every aspect that you see. Until we meet again, I am sending you all our infinite love. Thanks so much for listening. We hope you found these messages to be helpful. May they accelerate you on your path wherever you'd like it to go. For more information on the books which correspond to these podcast seasons, our podcast, live events, or how to get in touch with us, visit katieandthechorus.com. Thanks again. See you next time.